Hey everybody. Okay, so there is another term called getting stuck in the loop. And that is a really appropriate term because cancer, disease, chronic illness, autoimmune disorders, oh gosh, every kind of diagnosable condition is when the body is stuck in a loop and it's not allowed to progress. And so it will stay in the state that it's in with all the different pains, and it will go on decline because the pain will be managed by more remedies, more antibiotics. And then even though some people will get some kind of relief, they will still have to deal with being stuck in the loop because the monster is still inside the body and it will rear its ugly head when it wants to. So I finally can hang out with people. Now, I didn't go to a big party the other couple weeks ago because that would be too much mucus that I would have to deal with. And so when I went to the restaurant, that was a small experiential circumstance that gave me an idea of if I went to a restaurant, sat down for an hour and a half, what would I deal with? And it was just a little bit of mucus in the back of my throat. I wasn't coughing. I wasn't, no sickness in the restaurant, but I could feel my voice change. I could feel the stuff building up, but it just stayed in the back of my throat. It didn't go past my tonsils. It didn't go past my immune system, my defenses. And so when I was eating food, that's fine. You eat your food, your body will digest it. The next morning you get the poop out. But I was also up at 3 o'clock in the morning that day. And then when I went home, I took a tiny nap and then I was fine. I was blowing my nose a little bit, and especially the next morning, and everything is good. I'm doing great. Okay, great. I didn't have to feel like I couldn't go out to a restaurant. Okay. And so then today or last night, I went out and hung out with about a bunch of, not a bunch, but yeah, about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so 8 people in a small enclosed space, some outside and then inside. And I was fine eating food, wasn't drinking or smoking or anything like that, just drinking my Perrier water, and ate a few hot dogs, ate some, picnic food. And I could feel towards the end of the evening. So we were there like around 5-ish, 6-ish, and we didn't leave till about 10. So that's a good 4 hours, okay, of being in one place with the same people that I haven't seen in a long ass time. And it was nice to see them. It was nice. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like people, but I got to deal with my health. And if you're biologically feeling whatever, you don't want to deal with anybody until you biologically feel like you can without harming yourself. And so anyway, so I stayed there for about 4 hours, and I felt the end of the night, I felt kind of feeling like I'm under the influence. Like when you eat spicy food and your body's building up antibodies and you feel kind of drunk. It's like I was getting drunk off the people around me without drinking anything, without eating anything that had any kind of alcohol. It's the weirdest feeling. And so I would cough, and I would start coughing a little bit towards the end of the night, just a tiny bit. And okay, and so when we got home, I knew my face felt full. I knew the back of my throat felt full, but it wasn't like I felt bad. But I knew there was stuff building up in the background. And so overnight, I know my dog felt some stuff just because, we're bringing home so much energy and she's still working stuff out. Okay? And so I figured out if you have unresolved issues in your body and you get exposed to all this stuff, it's going to trigger it, and either you're going to respond to it in the old way, the traditional way, or you're going to respond to it in the way of the JJ world way, where you just deal with it. You blow your nose, get the poop out, and you eat food. And so I know that my dog is going to have to keep dealing with whatever she's dealing with until all of that stuff that's under her belly from the tumors that were taken out when she was at the ASPCA before we got her, when she had that spay, that invasive surgery. And so all that scar tissue and whatever other tumors that she might have in her body, that has to be worked out, and that's going to affect her neurological, her urinary, And I know she's still releasing mucus out of her vag, which means that the body is slowly releasing, and it's going to take time. And you'll have like we had back pain. My husband and I had back pain, but now it's gone. I mean, I pooped this morning and I blew my nose and I really worked everything out. And I know that she was feeling stiff. My dog Sugar was feeling a little bit stiff the last couple weeks, or the last week or so. And so I know with the frequencies and then her own stuff, and just with how different this atmosphere is, she's going to have to keep going through her layers and layers of evolution, retroactive evolution when you think about it, because it's not just really, you're in the current environment, but you have to deal with things that you never dealt with in the past. And so she has to deal with retroactive evolution. When you think about it, purging out the past antibodies and trauma, because scar tissue is trauma. Scar tissue is letting you know you went through some shit, and here are the memories, and these memories are right there at the strip. Like when I had that Norplant, and I had a lot of scar tissue because the surgeon, the surgeon that was doing the local surgery was digging those sticks out of my arm, and so then it wasn't like a keloid, but there was definitely scar tissue there that over the last 6 years, that scar tissue disappeared. Okay, so scar tissue is a sign of trauma. That's a no duh, but that's memories being held in your body that is also affecting how you think, feel, act, and all of that, and also your biological systems. All right, and so she's releasing the trauma from the surgeries, trauma from whatever that she had to go through prior to her arriving at our house. And so the last 2 years was peeling back the layers of my own predisposed issues, my own, and the COVID was the catalyst. Okay? It had to be, because you can't force your body to deal with its situation. Well, what the fuck am I trying to say here? Oh my gosh. Well, I'm just going to type it out now. Okay, so last 2 years was peeling back the layers of my own predisposed issues, and the COVID was the catalyst. And so it had to be, because you can't force your body to deal with the situation when it's cured. Okay? Because when your body's cured, it's cured. There has to be a catalyst, whether it's J juice or an aggressive virus. There has to be an aggressive catalyst, aggressive energy, and it could be a frequency too. And so that's why you have to think, when you finally come to terms that you have to be sick, it's your friends and families that will save you, or it's your friends and family that will destroy you. Okay? And if you don't know how to respond to the energy that your friends and family are giving you to bring up stuff, then they'll destroy you. But if you know how to respond to what your friends and family, when they bring up stuff, then they'll save you, because then you will then trigger the stuff. And so I know that I said, okay, I'm going to stay home forever and I'm never going to go out again and never have any friends, all that stuff. I mean, it seems like that, because biologically what you feel at the time and what you think is going to be the future, that's your reality. And so that's what you live from, and that's what you write about until something changes, until you get a new awareness. And it's not going to be what somebody else tells you. Awareness could be sort of, but not really, because they're just telling you something. You have no idea where it's coming from. You have no idea their intentions. You have no idea who they are. And so then you have to experience the layers and layers and layers and layers of awakening. And so, like I said, if you're going out there and you're not feeling the environment, and you're not feeling the stuff come up, and you're not resting from that, and you're not feeling the triggers that are coming through, then you're cured. And that's just then waiting for the inevitable. And so you have to take on new programming if you want to evolve. And that means that you have to feel sickness. Okay? You have to feel sickness and take the time. Going out and hanging out with people is difficult when not all of your issues are resolved, unless you want to be cured, of which then you know what will happen. So I can go hang out with people, and I do get buildup in the back of my throat after a certain amount of hours, and my voice changes and I start coughing a bit, but I don't feel sick. Okay? I don't feel sick when I'm in the shower and I'm blowing my nose and making sure everything is clean out there and everything. And I make sure I hawk up those looks, like I could feel everything in the back of my throat, and I have access to it. what the issue is people have all of their mucus stuff and things that they should have released a long time ago. It's way deep down in their system. And so when you get sick, that's why you hear people cough like it sounds like the death rattle. Okay? That's where the death rattle comes from, is because all that stuff that was allowed to come in was never released at the time that it came in, or processed or assimilated to, and so it's sitting and incubating in the body. And so when kids get their tonsils taken out, when they get their spleens and their gallbladders and their appendices taken out, they have totally taken down their defenses. And then there's going to be issues in the future, if not already. And so when you actually feel your defenses working the way it's supposed to, when you actually feel your immune system working the way it's supposed to, and you feel the stuff in the back of your throat, which gives you access to release, when you know your sphincter and you have to get the poop out, and I even saw a few kernels of corn come out, okay, and that was from a week ago, and I know my body is really processing every single food that I come in and maximizing and making the most of what I'm bringing into the body. Now I know my body's working exactly the way it's supposed to. And would I risk going out there in a crowd of people that are 200,000? Absolutely not. Not only because of just the amount of conflicting programming that I have to go and assimilate to, but then there's also just crazy people out there. Not saying that I should be afraid, but I don't really go to ball games. I don't really go to any really the sporting types of stuff. That's just not my forte, I guess. And so a gathering of a few people and maybe a big party once a year, that's fine. I didn't go to this last one because first of all, I was getting over the COVID, and so I didn't want to get anybody infected. But all people had it. Everybody had it, some form of it, and they probably would have been fine, but I just didn't really feel like it. It just was, I felt really I was tired, and I just was not in the frame of mind. And you're going to feel that way when you finally sit with your issues and you have to really evaluate everything. Because I'm going to tell you, even what you feel at the time right now is not going to be forever. It's going to change. Okay? As you've seen me change, you've seen me go through so much peeling back the layers. I'm pissed off at my mom, and I'm okay with whatever I had to deal with. Because when I look back on what I did with the J juice and what I'm doing with my dog, and everyone's like, you're experimenting on your dog. Well, if I've already known the outcome of the medical holistic system and of the veterinary system, and that we have come to know and perceive what normal is based upon somebody else programming our animals and our children and ourselves, then we don't know what normal is. And so there's no way to say that what I'm doing and what my dog looks like is abnormal, because we've been programmed in a specific way and then we expect to die. And so if you want to deprogram from that mentality and you don't expect to die, then there's no way to say that what I'm doing or not doing is normal. It's just I'm doing the opposite of what the medical holistic system is doing, and still taking account that you have to eat, you have to sleep, you have to poop, you have to release with mucus, you have an alimentary canal that needs to release from this way because my dog coughs, she gets out stuff, she poops, she has mucus that come out the back end, so I know her alimentary canal is working. Sometimes the viruses and the energy inside will make her pee when it's inopportune, okay, because she's going through an energy surge. That's just what's going to happen until she works out her trauma in her body, and I'm okay with that, and I'm dealing with that. And so then I realized, my mom was experimenting on us in behavioral type of sciences. I'm figuring out stuff biologically without using antibiotics, just using food and using salt water as a catalyst in the beginning. Yeah, if you give a dog too much salt water and all that, they'll be cured, and then they'll deteriorate just like a human. They'll still drink water. It's not like you're keeping water from them. They'll drink water, eat food, but you don't want to cure yourself, because curing yourself just delays the inevitable. It traps little vampire viruses inside your body that some of them are mean. They're antibodies that work against you. Because there's antibodies that will keep you alive, and there's antibodies that will work against you, and you have no idea which one is which. Again, you cannot go in and target the specific antibodies, because it's like you'd have to know which antibody is doing what, and you have to know what was the catalyst. It could have been that turmeric and honey. So you're going to create a therapy against turmeric and honey? That doesn't make sense. And so you have to let your body work out and disperse what it knows it doesn't need and what it knows it needs, which means that you have to actually feel the energy of the symptoms of the mucus. You got to be tired and go to sleep. You got to really take the time to take care of yourself. And it means that, yeah, you have to say, okay, put boundaries down. Am I going to go hang out with people every weekend? No, because there's no reason to. Okay, I mean, I got things to do, and hanging out with my husband is great. Maybe down the road, I just depends. Just depends on what's going on. Okay, but it's like, since I don't drink and smoke and all that stuff, not that but you know, when people are having fun, oh yeah, I could have fun, and I bantered back and forth. It was good, but it just depends. But right now, at this point, I got to get this book done. So once this book is done, and then I'm working on my second book, which will be the Unmasking the Beast, so that way you can see when people are programmed in a specific way, how it manifests in a young person and in an adult, because a young person and an adult are really the same thing. It's just that you've aged and you're at an acceptable age, like number age. And so when someone says, oh yeah, I'm 18 versus 15, you're legal at 18, but you're not legal at 15. And so you could have a 15 and 18-year-old with the same mentality, the same life experience, and one would be hanging out with an adult, getting exploited by an adult that's older, that has more experience. The other one couldn't. And so it's called jailbait, right? And so, you know, yeah, I'm going off on tangents. But, yeah. And so, adults and children are not really that different. And so, yeah, I was going off somewhere and I just completely lost my train of thought. That's okay. There's a lot going on in this world. There's a lot going on in the JJ world, and it's layer by layer. Your realities are going to change, and they will change daily as you feel something. Okay? They'll stay the same when you're the one that says, okay, I'm going to go here. So then you go to different places. But if you're not going to different places, then your reality stays the same. And so your realities can change when you can travel within your own inner universe. Because I'm telling you, I have something new to say almost every day because of my biological evolution. When people have to go and make experiences out there, then they're not in control of their evolution. They're in the programming. Oh, I got to go here. I got to go here. I got to go here. In order for me to feel like I'm doing something in my world, I have to go to all these different places, travel over here, travel over here, travel over here. And in reality, you can travel within your own inner universe and understand yourself and understand biologically what you feel. And then you can travel on the internet and understand other thought processes. But it does take time. And so I can hang out with people, and I do get buildup in the back of my throat after a certain amount of hours, and my voice changes, and I start coughing a little bit. The next morning, my defenses release a bunch of mucus. And so my reality is predicated upon how I biologically feel based upon the unresolved situations, and then it's dealing with the current situation at hand and never let it build up again like it did. So, yeah, when you get to this point, which will be longer than 6 years for some of you because of your situation, when you get to this point, you will never, ever try to stuff back any kind of feeling of energy. You will feel the monster build up in the back, and you will not let that monster fester inside. Because if I ever have to be in a situation where I have to keep the monster inside, which will never happen, even if let's say I go to a job or go out like to a job every single day, and every night I have to go and release the monster from hanging out with people, that's a lot of work. To be around people, right? You know what you're in for when you come home. You're going to have to release that monster that was built up from all of that circulating energy and proteins and all that. And so, I don't know, man. I was going somewhere with that, and I just... And and so that's part of the manifestation of going through that process in the morning. Your cylinders are firing, but you get on a thing and then that connection breaks because you're still now assimilating to the different world that you were in the night before. Okay? And so that's what I'm saying. When you stay in a specific world, things will be nice and homeostasis is great. You're kind of cured in your own way. As soon as you leave your house, or as soon as the frequencies change, or when the frequencies change, it's because it's bringing up your own predisposed issues. Okay? And then of course my husband didn't ever come home, and he just stayed out there, and it was just my dog and I. Then the frequencies would force us to deal with our own predisposed issues, and so we'd feel whatever we feel until everything is great. And then we just keeping up with the frequencies in the environment, we've adapted. But as soon as we leave the house and we go into a crowd of people, or we go and hang out with people, or somebody comes and visits us, they're going to bring energy and proteins that we have to assimilate to. And so then when you want to split everything apart and compartmentalize, you first have to deal with your issues inside before you really hang out with the world. Because it's difficult to deal with your issues inside and still hang out with the world and try to jockey between the two, because eventually you're not going to want to feel so much sickness inside because you want to hang out with people. And you got to make a choice. Is it you or them? That's what it comes down to. I mean, this is Sunday. Is it you or is it somebody else that's more important? Well, that's selfish that you're more important. Well, I mean, if you're running the household and you're taking care of your animals and your kids and you're not around, then you just made it selfish, and now you've taken away the most important factor in the household is you. Okay? You all are important to your friends and family. They'll understand if everybody left each other and went home and took care of themselves, and they were doing amazing, and then they come back together again. They can come back together again, and then everyone's just like even better and stronger and all that. But it's like, no, I mean, you got to take care of you. You got to take care of you first. And if that means that you have to leave people for a while and stay out of the limelight for a while, then you do that. Okay? Then you do that. But let me tell you, you have to take care of you. You got to figure out how much of the healing process and bringing up the past are you willing to deal with. And it's going to be a lot. And doing it by yourself, you got to have a sounding board. You got to hear yourself. I mean, if you have no one to talk to, not even your animal, then you do a video and watch yourself. But there's not a lot of feedback when you do that, right? So then you go on Facebook Live if you're even brave enough. But that is part of the maturing process, the growing up process. Increasing your intelligence is when you can go on a Facebook Live and you don't care what people think about you. You don't care that you're going to stumble and make a mistake or lose your train of thought and then not even make the point you were trying to make because you were so excited that you were going to make it. That's what it feels like sometimes. And you're okay with that. You can just redirect. Okay? It's be able to recover from something that broke, and you're not like obsessing over the fact that you couldn't finish that thought that was so exciting that it just overheated you. Okay? And then you have something to say, something to share, whether it's like E = MC squared, or man, I tell you, when going out with people, I can feel all this mucus come up, and I know I'm never going to take an antibiotic or any kind of suppressant, and I'm going to deal with it. And so it's like, and then there's other things, there's other streams of thought you can talk about. But then if you're worried about, your friends, your family, your kids, and all that, wondering what they're thinking that you're talking about, and you got to be careful, you don't want to do any kind of invasion of privacy, then you have a lot more but my husband, my dog, I don't say everything about what he goes through, but enough for you guys to get it. I don't do too much invasion of his privacy on a grander scale. It's just certain things that, okay. But my dog is an open book. I'm relatively an open book. I don't say every single thing. I mean, there's got to be some form of privacy in my world. I mean, even though it doesn't seem like it or is. But yeah, I was talking to a few ladies yesterday, lovely ladies, and it was nice to just talk. about different things that are really outside of this scope of what I'm covering and all that. And so then your brain works in a different way. It switches gears and it works in a different way. And it's nice. And so it's good to exercise your brain. It's good to bring up biological stuff so then you can understand how your environment impacts you and what is building up, what builds up. So when I am around people now and I feel the stuff that builds up, then I know what people are going through, because people don't feel the stuff building up because their defenses have been atrophied, and so they're taking stuff in. They're taking stuff in. They're taking stuff in, and it is incubating and replicating, and it's going to get organized. Okay? And when things get organized, that's the cancer, disease, and chronic illness and autoimmune disorders that people deal with. Those are the diagnosable conditions. And so you have to build up your immune system, and that means that you have to build up the defenses, so that way when you are around people, places, and things, and new environments, that you have the defenses there, so then you can feel them, and then you know at night or in the morning, you got to release everything that doesn't assimilate with your body the next morning. And that's blowing your nose, that through understanding your sphincter to get the poop out. That is really hawking up the loogies. And so that's not being sick as far as a bad thing. That's your defense system. That's what people are afraid of. That's what people are taking their elderberry syrup and their turmeric and honey and all their detoxes and anti-mucus protocols. And no, you have to cough it out. You have to blow it out. And so this morning I blew a tiny little mucus. I had a little bit of green stuff, and that's fine because it's infection, yes, but it's because the body was building up stuff from being around people, not because they're like, biological hazards. No, people are people. They have stuff that you have to assimilate to, and you also have predisposed issues. But when you have predisposed issues, the next day you're tired. When you have predisposed issues, the next day you're feeling irritable. When you have predisposed issues that you haven't resolved yet, you are sleeping a whole lot. And you're like, well, I can't go out and hang with people if I have to sleep for 2 fucking days to recover. That was my reality for a couple years. For the last 2 years, hanging out with people required so much out of me. And I'm trying to write a book and do this. And I go hang out with people, and then I have to go sleep for the next 2 days or 3 days or whatever. Well, this morning, it wasn't like that. This morning, I hung out with people, and I felt the mucus build up during that process of being around. So my body took my body time to realize I was in a different environment. I was in a different space. I was getting in different proteins, and I was eating food from somebody else's house. And then I felt the mucus kind of build up, but it wasn't coming out. But towards the end of the night, I was sort of coughing stuff out, but not a lot, just a little bit. I could feel my voice change. And then I came home and I went to sleep, took my dog out, do some stuff, and I blew my nose this morning, released a bunch of stuff. And there's no tired. I got up at 6 because my dog was up. But I don't feel tired. I feel really just calm, clear-headed, and I'm like, oh my God, this is such a new feeling. And yesterday when my husband asked me, you want to go over to these people's houses? I'm like, yeah. But a couple weeks ago or even last year, I'd be like, fuck no, go have fun. I'm not going anywhere because I gotta write this book, and if I go out and hang out with people, no offense to them and whatever, I will be down for like 2 fucking days, and I just can't afford that right now because I gotta do this and I'm trying to do this, and I had to just deal, and so, but then I realized that after I dealt with the COVID plus the co-infection, and I released that beast, and then I released all that beast of my childhood shit and all that crap. That also, any kind of trauma in childhood, from the programming during your childhood, the programming, and anything else that's traumatic happened between that point and now, that comes out in a mucus form. That is a memory. That is a protein memory that actually does cause cancer, disease, and chronic illness. And so, again, it's not just the trauma, the physical trauma, and the biological trauma of the remedies and the antibiotics and the surgeries and alcohol, drugs, and sex. Then it becomes also the psychological trauma that also contributes to cancer, disease, chronic illness, autoimmune disorders, all the different diagnosable conditions. And so when you can translate psychological trauma to proteins and mucus and disease, then you realize that you have to go through the whole gamut. You can't just go and be like, okay, I'm going to go to a therapist and talk stuff out, but still suppress the mucus. That is like, what? That doesn't even make sense. I mean, it's fun for a minute. It's a cure. But those don't last very long because the proteins are still inside your body. That's what I'm saying. When you do talk therapy, when you're going to cathartic, self-help groups, or you're taking a cure and, NyQuil or any other of those drugs and all that stuff, it's a temporary relief. Yeah, it gets you back in the game, but the monster is brewing inside. At some point, you got to deal with that monster. And when you finally do deal with that monster, then not only will you have to feel the misery of the physical pains, of feeling like lead in your joints, and you can't stand up for too long, and you're so tired, and you're just like, Then after that, then you get angry. Like I said, you get angry when you finally deal with your childhood demons. You get angry because of all the antibiotics. You get angry at everything that even represents antibiotics in the medical holistic system. And then the psychological trauma of whoever. It could be your mom, dad, sister, brother, your clergyman, your teacher, anyone, ex-boyfriend, ex-husband, and there's stuff in there that you've stuffed down deep inside, and when it finally comes out, it's like a tidal wave of emotion, and now finally your body is able to deal with that emotions, because over time you have released the layers and layers and layers and layers and layers, and I'm telling you, the last 6 years, it's been layers and layers and layers of programming, and it's each reality of my biological reality was my reality, what I thought was going to be for the rest of my freaking life, that day, until something changed. What was that? It was a new virus. It was a new hive. It was a new something. Somebody told me last night that my hives was like anxiety. I probably would not disagree. And she's a nurse, and she said, yeah. I'm like, yeah, because when I had the hives that came out, that's a lot of anxiety that's in your body that you're releasing. That's a lot of anxiety. So I went through a lot of release this last couple years. And the winter, the spring, summer, fall, the seasons, the pollen, all the different changes, the frequencies, are all going to bring up everything that you've ever dealt with. Your friends and family, they're going to bring up so much trauma. And it's going to be biological, physical, and psychological. And you have to respond to it correctly. Not with antibiotics, not with any therapies. You have to respond it with food, rest, and release. Okay? Because if you don't, then it will be the monster that brews even more so, and it gets bigger. But people don't see it as it getting bigger. It's just they age faster, or they're increasing in weight, or they're losing weight. And when you lose a lot of weight over a long period of time, you do age faster. And so, yeah. And so that was such an amazing awakening this morning and last night. But I was just like, yeah, my body said yesterday, yeah, I can go hang out. I just knew. Like, my body knew it can go and hang out. What was so different yesterday than a year ago? Because I went through some crazy ass awakenings the last couple weeks. And I feel strong. Like, I feel strong. I actually feel my defenses. Not that it's like I feel sick, but I know that I have a whole army in my immune system that I know is there, and I can feel it. And you can probably even hear it. But it's not a bad thing. It's the defenses. So that way, when you do get around someone that has stuff, you have defenses right there, that it's not trying to find it in the body, that it's right there. And so people get their tonsils taken out. Oh, Jesus Christ. Anyone that goes through the medical holistic system taking out stuff because of infection, forget it. It's done. It's done. It's done. And with so much going on in this day and age, and the environment and the viruses and the people and the frequencies and the stress, you think these kids that are being trained not to feel any pain, you think they're going to feel pain the next 10 years? I doubt it. They'll be lost in their addictions, or if they even survive. So it's just, the adults are the future. It's not the children. No, it's not the children. I've seen even kids that have really strong, that you think is strong. I've seen 2 kids. One's like really skinny, and he broke his arm. The other one is robust, broke his front arm. You thought that the kid that was really strong and robust, like a football player, would be able to withstand some kind of stress to the arm. Nope. And these kids inside, their bones are deteriorating. I'm drinking milk every other night give or take. I'm drinking milk in my coffee. I'm building up my calcium, building up my calcium and, well, my bones from the calcium from the milk. You know, I have other elements that vitamin D from the sun, a little bit of stress going up and down the stairs and all that stuff. I don't do too much exercise. I don't just not move. I'm not like immobile. So it's like you really have to understand how to now finally rebuild yourself from the ground up, from all the programming of the government, from your parents, from all the different. I'm telling you, I now figured out what MK Ultra is. The MK Ultra, is the LSD program. That's where all the great artists from the 1960s and all that, they came out. They were under extreme amounts of MK Ultra. Okay, trauma-based programming, the drug culture, and then being programmed from that. Then you get the serial killers like Charles Manson and Dahmer and all those different people, Bundy. But trauma. But then there is that's right. Then there is the behavioral scientists that say, okay, we're not going to use drugs because we're not going to try to drug out the child, but we're going to use different behavior modification practices. Extreme positive negative reinforcement. So if you're not doing extreme stuff on the inside, the kinetic energy on the inside and causing trauma that way, and you cause trauma on the outside, and you're very cold and very, whatever on the outside, getting that entity, that subject to perform. Okay, then that's a way to train or instill, nurture programming. And so when people get traumatized by the drugs and all the pharmaceuticals and the holistic remedies on the inside, the body goes in defense. It tries to resist the antibiotics. It tries to resist the NyQuil. It'll try to resist all that stuff. And with that resistance comes then this monster, this defensive monster that will then cannibalize you. And so if you do behavior modification and you do what goes on the inside, on the outside, and you do trauma-based programming that way, you can then instill a nurture, a type of programming in that child or that adult. And so then I realized that, yes, the whole Weather Underground, the militant, radical Marxist left, they figured out how to infiltrate academia. Say, okay, if we can't go and bomb all these buildings in the Capitol, if we can't go and do that domestic terrorism, then how do you change the system? You change it from within. How do you change it from within? You get into the educational system. And then you promote college. You promote getting a degree. You promote you have to get into the system to change it. You can't be on the outside changing it because there'll be resistance. When people are buying into the mainstream, buying into all that, they'd be like, you're just a fringe group. Then there's all the psychological operations. Oh, you're just a fringe group. You have issues. You're a conspiracy theorist. Okay? And so they'll find ways to really discredit you because you're working from the outside in versus the inside out. And so, the Weather Underground, all those members, the left, way back in the 1960s, they infiltrated the academic system. They rewrote the textbooks, rewrote the curriculum, and all of that, and even rewrote behavior modification for children, child rearing, adult behavior modification, even in the government and mainstream media, the journalists. And so that's why it's called The Secrets of Silicon Valley, my book, because that's how they were able to get in. It's in the tech world. It's in, Stanford and Berkeley. Well, that's why Berkeley is such a, UC Berkeley. That was the hub. Okay, when you think about Weather Underground, they were out of Berkeley, California. Okay, they were out of Detroit, Chicago, New York City, Michigan. Okay, and so when you have those bases of thought and whatever, and you're putting a foothold in the area, and then all that, and then you bring in people, say, okay, we're done with the right wing, the real conservative, intolerant, sending off our kids to war type of thing, I guess. I mean, you could say it's a contrived thing that they're like, oh, we're going to plan a war and we're going to be everybody go here and you can do this. But then, so it's hard to know what exactly is true and not true, but I mean, or what is contrived or what is organic, and everything is contrived and organic. Can I claim conspiracy even prior to the 1960s? No, yeah, well, sort of the 1950s was like the MK Ultra. Then you think of the 1940s was all the Nazi stuff, right? The experiments on in the concentration camps, and before that, it was like, World War I, and before that, it was the 1800s. It's all the scientists in Europe, right? And then before the 1800s, and that was all, Copernicus and whatever, you had Galileo and all that, in the 1700s, 1600s, you have Europe and the Renaissance, and now you're going into early modernity. and it's not even, think about every 100 years, it's not that long. That's just one person's lifespan. If they even reach that, it could be two people's lifespan. But, 100 years and 100 years, 300 years, right? That 300 years ago, 2019, that's only like 1800, 1700. And when did we become America? 1776? That wasn't very long ago, guys. We're really freaking new. America is so new. And the innovation is really not that new. It's been around for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And the stuff's been archived ever since antiquity, ever since we found the first written record. Okay, cuneiform, the Sumerians, the Sumer, and all of their city-states. And then we leap forward, in the Western Civ to then, Babylon, and then the Greek stuff. And then, and then you have the Rosicrucians. Okay, and then they're driving all of this. And then here you go, the 1960s. And maybe they made the people think that you have to get into academia. They already knew. Okay, you let something grow and fester at one side, and I don't know, man. I'm really painting this to be like there's a wizard somewhere that is one wizard, two wizards. They're like, okay, we're gonna go and program the Democrats, Republicans, and we're gonna program Nixon and Ford and Eisenhower and all the different presidents and JFK and all that. That's right, JFK was before Nixon, right? And so they're programming them to say this or say that. It's such, guiding populations that are based on history is such an elaborate maze of strategy and programming. And of course, the dying and reproducing, when people are dying and reproducing, they don't really remember history. So that's why people think that what happened in 2020 was like new. These young kids that were like encouraged to go and riot. And people are like, oh, it's George Soros and all this stuff. You're like, well, potentially, yeah. I mean, if these kids are being guided by someone who's been around for like at least 80 years, give or take. Yeah, so they think it's all new, that they're going to go and do this and do that, and they get paid to do it. And then they're set free, from the justice system, maybe paid a fine and all that. They think it's all new, but no, this has been done before, back in the 1960s. So all of you that went and rioted back in 2020, yeah, you're being guided by those that probably did the same thing back then. But then those that did the same thing back then in the 1960s, someone else went and rioted before you did and told you to go and do the bomb. So who told the leftist Marxist, okay, the Weather Underground, what to be? Someone told them that already knew that it worked in prior civilizations, in prior societies, in prior governments and economies. And so nothing is new under the sun, absolutely nothing. The reason why I'm referencing back to the 1960s is because that was the day that was the time that I was raised, and I have some kind of relationship to it. I have no relationship to the 1700s. I have no relationship to the 1600s. Shit could have happened, the Boston Tea Party. Yeah, that was another riot of sorts against the bourgeois, right? Another proletariat type situation. Yeah, that's how 1776 happened, We're tired of the redcoats and paying taxes and, the tea tax, the stamp tax, and all these taxes. And so you have the proletariat going against the bourgeois. Well, that's no different than the social cultural revolution in China, the bourgeois versus the proletariat, and even now the bourgeois against the proletariat. And you're like, just like, oh shit, it's the same thing: the rich versus the poor, the rich versus the poor, the haves versus the have-nots, the educated versus the uneducated. It's like, it's dizzying how much history keeps repeating itself, because people keep dying and reproducing, so their memories are short. And then those that have access to the archive material from way back in antiquity know how to keep playing the same record. Just call it a different name. You know, you're not wearing the bell bottoms anymore, and now you're wearing, your tighty whities or something. And so even the costumes change, but the programming is still the same. And so now we got to break the programming. And so then, I'm taking after my mom by doing my own experiments, that's not using antibiotics. And I'm saying, okay, she had to do what she had to do to get me to be programmed and rebel and all that shit. Well, I'm not doing that to my dog, but her having to deal with all of her predisposed issues without using the veterinary system on her. People are like freaking out. You're like, you're abusing your dog. You're killing your dog. You're doing this to your dog. They're calling the ASPCA on me, calling the police on me, calling everything. And I'm like, dude, what the hell? Oh my God. And my dog's fine. She's got to go through her shit. And I'm the most patient, when she has to pee or poo, and it happens to be, in the bed because she's going through an energetic thing at night. I'm not getting mad at her. If she has to go pee, and I'm not listening or paying attention to her body language, and she pees, I'm not going to get mad at her. I don't hit her for nothing. Because until she heals her scar tissue, until she heals her scar tissue and that gets purged out, I'm gonna do whatever I can to let her to help her get out when she needs to get out. But I'm not gonna punish her for whatever she has to do biologically. Okay? She's going through a healing process that is like no other, that people will not understand because they're under the influence and they're gonna die in the next 30 years. So they'd rather be cured and go out with a bang than have to deal with the unpredictable biological things that happen when your body is evolving, retroactive evolution, and then adapting to the current environment. And so bourgeois versus the proletariat, that's just an ongoing thing. And that will happen even in the next century, because people will be like, oh, why are we eating mealy worms and and whatever, and we're living in our tiny little houses with electric cars and having to bring a pass to go wherever we go, and these guys here are pulling the strings and are living their lavish vacations and living out there. It's like, who cares? I don't care. Okay, I really don't care. I just don't. I'm gonna live and do my thing. Every reality is based upon your expectations and what you were trained to think is appropriate and what you want. And when you release all those little demons inside of you, the mucus and all that crap, you're not going to want to cook extravagant meals. You're not going to have a billion types of foods in your house. It's going to be a certain amount of food in your house that you like, that your body needs, that tastes good. And it's going to be the same thing over again. And you're going to watch your TV and you're going to watch your movies. You're going to write stuff and expand your mind. And maybe you meet a few people or see people or meet some new people every so often. And maybe if you can, you go visit a different place if you want. I mean, if that's what you want to do, if that's what your inclination is. But it really, your wants and needs and your expectations are going to be diminishing. And the anger and all that, the hurt and all that sorrow and the anxiety diminish. And then you're just like a peaceful person. And then society becomes peaceful because the people are freaking peaceful. The animals are peaceful. Okay? And that's utopia without having to pay for it later on. Is when people finally deal with their predisposed issues. And we don't have the greedy ass MFers out there that are programming you to want all these baubles and cars and 10,000 square foot houses, and you'll have your hobbies, but will the hobbies be the same? Will they have the fishing down the road where you're fishing for game or fishing for sport, hunting for sport? No. We're going to create foods where everything is going to be in a little square. Probably. Will it be fulfilling? hopefully, if you're not having to deal with so many viruses, I don't mind taking a package of nutrients. Okay, a package of nutrients that will give me and sustain me and make me amazing. Okay, but if my environment is dynamic and I have 1 billion people that I have to go and assimilate to, I'm not going to be living off of little tiny freaking squares. I'm going to want my burritos. I'm going to want my spaghetti and my meat and my milk and my cheese and my eggs. Okay, but so you know, for us to graduate to like eating a little tiny square package of nutrients means that all of society is not dying and reproducing. When you're dying and reproducing, you have to have so much types of diverse food. When society stops dying and reproducing, and when they are reproducing, it is done carefully, and then when people have to be introduced to that new baby, okay? Because when someone dies, they die, and then that body gets burned or buried or whatever, and no one has to deal with anything in it that's breaking down. And if it is breaking down, you're already assimilated to it, so no big deal. But when there's a new baby being brought into the world, that's new information that everyone has to go and assimilate to. That's like when you're releasing your viral RPGs. Everyone has to go and assimilate to that. And that's what all my defense is when they were up last night. And so when people stop reproducing so much, babies and all that, then we won't have to have such a diverse amount of crazy food and greed, and then people programming people to do this, and then it gets out of hand, and people become out of hand, and then there's the breakdown. There's the homicidal maniacs, the autism, the suicides, the depression, and then you have just the emotions that run the gamut. And so, yeah, I mean, I envision a society where we have everyone in their pods, and if they want to travel to a different pod, well, every pod's going to have relative homeostasis and assimilation, but there's going to be, obviously you have a pod over here that's all into the hippie stuff and all the drugs and all that stuff, and you're relatively drug free and all that, and you go into that pod. You better be strong enough to deal with that pod. That's no different than going to somebody else's house or some other city or some other country. You have to assimilate. But when you have 500 million people on this planet, let's say, go back to the Georgia Guidestones, you have 500 million people, and how are the 500 million people are going to be controlled and regulated so we don't have the breakdown of our society, everybody dying and reproducing and then causing so much chaos? And so, yeah, how do you tell someone that we've bred family into you, and you have a family and get married and you have all your parties and all your stuff, and until now, we don't want any more family. But then, like, well, if I have no more family, who's going to carry on the genetic line? What kind of life am I have if I don't have a family? Well, right now, I have my husband. I don't have any kids. I have a dog. I'm dealing with my own predisposed issues. I'm home more than not. I'm expanding my brain. I'm realizing that my reality is based on my biology, and there's so much more awareness. So, yeah, you can actually have an amazing life on your own, watching the sacrifices on TV, the entertainers. What are the entertainers basing their entertainment on? Those that are also breaking down. And so that's why they get paid a bunch of money, because they're paid to break down. Look at Brad Pitt. He wasn't going to stay beautiful forever. He's aging aggressively. Okay? Look at all the different stars that are like, look at Britney Spears. That girl, holy shit. She deserves where she is now, but she's gone through some shit, and she's aging too. Okay, and so they're the ones. So when we're all finally dealing with our retroactive evolution, and we can evolve and assimilate, and now we want some kind of hormonal response to bring up pleasure, like when I'm watching Schitt's Creek and I'm watching Daniel Levy and Eugene Levy. Oh my God, it's so funny. They make me laugh. And so when I want to laugh, I'll watch Schitt's Creek. When I want something that's like dark and this and that, I'll watch a horror movie. Well, somebody has to go and play those parts. Someone has to go through the trauma of being in that horror movie. Someone has to go through that trauma of bringing up all of their hormones to be entertaining, to make me laugh. So they should get paid millions and millions and millions of dollars, because when you're doing that on a constant basis for years and years and years and years, you're going to have to die in the end. Unless you're willing to get out of the limelight, get out of the public eye, save your money, and go recoup the resources lost from your whole career, and then redirect. What are you going to do next? And that's a lot to ask somebody. Okay, unless they're willing to, unless they know that's what's in the future, they're going to do, they're acting and play a certain part that's based upon someone in the population, like, Eileen Wuornos. And so Charlize Theron had to actually take on weight and look really bad for her to play that part. And so, her body had to go through a lot of trauma to even look like someone that went through a bunch of trauma. And so these actors are going through trauma in order for them to play the part of people who have gone through freaking trauma. And that's a lot. That is a lot. And so I have to respect them. You got to respect the actors and actresses, because they've been programmed to do this, and they've trained their body to morph when they were told to morph. And it may take them a couple of years or even 6 months to gain a bunch of weight so they can play the part correctly, or lose a bunch of weight so they look emaciated so they can play the part. To entertain you when you're trying to bring up hormones because you're now in relative homeostasis. Everything is just like, wow. And so that's a working society. There's going to be the sacrifices. Okay, so then people, if they're bred for that, and that's the Hollywood politics, religion, and science, and that's what they're bred to do, and they're going to go through that trauma of going through all those emotions so they can entertain us. We as people watching them, okay, well, I won't necessarily go into religion, and I'm not going to go into the sciences field, but the politics, religion, and science is to program people to then be representation of the actors, to represent those that go through the trauma of it happening organically. And so then a third entity of that situation, so you have an entity that knows the situation that's going on and can see it for what it is, those that program people and those that are being programmed, okay? And then the people that are being programmed don't know they're being programmed, and so they just act out whatever they act out, and they might do horrible things. And then you have the actors that watch that and then want to go and copy that and then entertain you so they don't have to reenact someone's trauma. And then the police then go in and arrest a person that didn't know they were programmed, and then they acted out. I mean, that's our society. So are we going to go and reinvent the wheel? Or you're going to choose. Now you have a choice. You can be a programmer. You can be an actor that reenacts someone that's been programmed that made mistakes. And are you going to be, so are you going to be a programmer, an actor, or the programmed? And so then there's a fourth entity when you think about it. Jesus. I'm really going too deep in this, or maybe not. But it's true. There's a programmer, the actor, who's been programmed too, and then there's people who've been programmed that don't know they're being programmed, and so they act. And then there's those that know exactly what's going on and are watching all three of them, do what they got to do. And then then they die. That's the human sacrifice now. Though in places like third world countries, they do other human sacrifice. But yeah, I gotta write that down. Oh my Lord. So there's 3, and then there's us. So 3, so there's the programmer, the programmed, and they're the actors, and they can be programmed too. Programmers, and then the programmed population that gives oops, sorry. Oh my God. That gives the script. So I was thinking yesterday, I was talking to this person about, they were talking about a story or a movie they saw called The Crawdad, the Song of the Crawdad or something. And they were saying, you said it was it's fiction. But it was kind of based, it's fiction, but the person that wrote that story had experiences someplace and there was controversy. And so, anyways, I'm saying like all storylines are based in reality with some exaggeration and allegory. But sometimes the things that are fiction that seem like it's based in reality, the reason why it's called fiction because they couldn't get their permission to talk about a person's situation, and so they had to loosely base the story on someone's situation without actually revealing who the person is. And so when you think about all the scripts and the programming, all the programming is based upon some other storyline or a reality that happened before, and you can exaggerate it, but when you actually write the story and you didn't get permission to use somebody else's life as the basis point, then you have to really change certain things so it doesn't come off exactly the same or allude to the fact of who it is. And so, yeah, all the programming out there, all the storylines, it is based loosely on past things and past situations. And so then now with all of that, like chemistry, all of those different storylines, as long as you know the different elements of the story, the elements of the universe, and physics and chemistry and biochemistry and biology and all of that, then you can develop yet another storyline that probably existed. And I'm sure it has existed somewhere else on other planets where you can finally deal with a diverse amount of people and not be aged from them. That you have such a strong defense system and a strong body that the defense system is not going to overtake the body, and the body is not going to overtake the defense system. And that's exactly what goes on right now, is people's defense systems are actually destroying the body. And so now, last night when I went out, I have a strong body and I have a strong defense system. And that's exactly where you want to be. Strong body, strong defense system. You can't miss. You really can't miss. And that's where you want to end up eventually. And so there's my streams of thought for today. I'm going to write some stuff down from that. There's those two things at least that I got from that. And happy Sunday. I'm going to drink some of my coffee and say hi to my dog again. And yeah, you guys have a good one. Bye.